Hello, and welcome to Ticket Manager's All Access interview series, where we engage leaders from across the sports marketing spectrum to identify and explore critical issues in the business of sport, entertainment, sponsorship, activation, ticketing, hospitality, and more. I'm one of your co-hosts tonight, Michael Goldstein. Spent a long time on the brand side, the last 11 years at MasterCard, now doing consulting on my own, and happy to say Ticket Manager is a client of mine, and very happy to be here today. So with that, I'll let my fellow co-host, Ken Davidoff, give a wave. Ken, as some of you may know, longtime baseball columnist based in the New York area. He still has emeritus status at the New York Post, where he was a baseball columnist for years, and is now an adjunct professor at Endicott College in the greater Boston area. So Ken, thank you for co-hosting with me. And certainly Scott Boras, who probably doesn't need an introduction, but the owner and founder of Boras Corp, and as I hear it, an attorney who represents baseball players. We welcome you, Scott, and are very happy to be talking about the business of baseball with spring training underway and a new season almost upon us. As usual, a busy off season for you. And I guess let's start with just an overall current assessment of the business of baseball from your POV.
Better said by others than me. Our commissioner has announced that we again have record revenues, record attendance, and that our media rights, for whatever reason, are not to the level of leagues that play half as many games or less, and probably something, a part of our game we need to review. But I think having great young players in the game and certainly having a game where there is definitely parity, because we keep seeing a lot of the different teams win the World Series and also different teams in the World Series. So the sport, I think, is accomplishing a lot of things that other sports are not in that area. So I think in a talent-driven world, we are fortunate to have a lot of great players, both veteran and young, and I think that's what's drawing the interest. And I think the gaming industry has now had an influence on the game to bring in a generation of personal involvement into the sport. And so I think the streaming concept is going to be a very dynamic influence, both revenue-wise and interest-wise going forward. So I would say all in all that sport in general is in a great position, and baseball specifically, because of the number of games it plays and need for content's in a great position.
Scott, you mentioned the media rights and the streaming possibilities. And I know you and your group study this industry as deeply, if not more so than as anyone. Obviously, big recent news was ESPN opting out of their deal after 2025. Seen a lot of these smaller teams have issues with their regional sports networks, a bit of the bursting of the bubble there. What do you see a clear path to get to whether it's streaming or somewhere else to recoup these revenues and improve upon them?
Ironically, we had another sport that only plays 81 games and has lesser ratings receive a TV contract because they negotiated their media rights really collectively and in a manner that really caught the value of what sports programming and content's worth. And so we developed the streaming hardware. Baseball did, ironically, many years earlier. And for whatever reason, they sold the rights to external entities, which then became, in and of itself, the cancer of cable. So ironically, this has led to now a situation where we have antiquated cable contracts. The cable contractors themselves are opponents of streaming. And instead of maybe earlier in time, the vision should have been a collaborative with the streaming that we invented to now allow a prosperous media rights evaluation. So essentially, we have a league that has done now over double the media rights. We have twice the content and higher ratings. Future negotiations should register a much higher platform, vastly more revenues in the process, assuming that our negotiating standard and representation standard is utilizing past practices by the content seekers, those platforms, and what their advertisers are receiving or paying for them. So that in and of itself says that negotiations set a precedent that should be very, very helpful to baseball going forward.
Yeah, the NBA TV situation is fascinating, as you said. I'm going to pivot to a gentleman you know a little bit named Juan Soto. And what I'm curious about as we talk about promoting the game of baseball and optimizing its potential, when you're pitching a superstar like Juan Soto, and obviously Steve Cohen was the winner of that sweepstakes, how global do you get when talking with Steve and the Mets about promotional return on investment opportunities for Juan, or is it more of a micro presentation, just focusing on what Juan brings to the field and the clubhouse?
I think the term pitching is something that probably is for someone who has a product that they're going to bring to people. In our business, we represent talent, and we have 30 vendors that come to us. So we don't do a lot of pitching. We do a lot of listening and understanding, and we do things to optimize our players. There certainly are times that teams may not know they need a talent, and it's our jobs to kind of advise and provide data, if you will, that they will then assess. But in the case of Juan Soto, it was the biggest issue for people to understand about Juan Soto is what a great, young, brilliant information taker he is. Juan, at the age of 17, he didn't have much, a young Dominican boy. And here he is playing in the World Series at 20 and the big leagues at 19. And I had 68 meetings with Juan between when we began and the time he signed with the Mets. And all that time he had to talk about market proliferation, appreciative values of franchise, media rights, the value of talent, the value of age, the value of the surplus values. He had all these metrics to deal with. And as a boy, turning down at 21, $100 million, and then 200, and 3, and then 4, then being offered the largest contract in sport at the time. And the questions that would come to him with the masses saying, "What are you doing?" And who would ever give you such advice that was competent? And that's coming from relatives and friends and fellow players. And then he goes to New York and everyone's saying, "Look, Ohtani is valued at $450 million. You turned down $440. Are you ever going to see that again? Because you don't pitch. You actually arguably don't hit as well as Ohtani. And you certainly don't bring in $100 to $200 million in revenue for your team. What would make you think you're going to get Ohtani levels in baseball?" That's it. That's the ceiling. And that's what Juan Soto had to deal with. And go out and have a historic season. And go out and play in the postseason. And we all will never forget that at bat in Cleveland, those, 3 sliders, 2 changeups, 3 changeups, and then a fastball home run. It's remarkable what he had to deal with and to go through to get to the point. A lot of these negotiations we knew that everybody was going to start at the levels of Ohtani, which they all did. And then it was our jobs as negotiators to really show value. And part of that value is that when you're talking about what it is that is near a ballpark but isn't included in the ballpark revenues. Because you see, when you talk about CBAs and you talk about elements of that, you're looking at proximity-based revenues, PBRs. PBRs are not in the revenue definition. But if you have an Atlanta-based entity, and you know because they're publicly based, you understand that this club is making above expenses $300-400 million a year, and 60 to 80 of that is from proximity-based elements outside the ballpark, which don't have to be revenue shared per the CBA. And the reason why all these entities are building that, and with the question being do you have an intent to build proximity-based revenue resources outside? Well, we certainly do. Oh, how can that be maximized by having superstar talent? So that's one area that is highly valuable to teams by having superstars. The second one of that is that talent recruitment and talent retention, is that players who play with these great superstars the team owner has the ability to keep his players there without leaving to free agency, or recruit players in free agency. You're going to attract the best talent and retain the best talent. And Bryce Harper is a great example, because you can see that Nola and that all of the great pitchers that are there stayed. Realmuto stayed. Recruiting Schwarber, Castellanos, Turner. You see how that Bryce Harper will be there, how that superstar talent keeps some of the greatest pitchers, greatest players there, and creates this core element. That has great value to the winning component of a franchise. And so when you also go down to advertisers buy from the local streaming. They want that resource by having superstar players, by having people of notoriety on your team. There is more interest regionally now, but when streaming becomes national, even there to watch your team. So all those components were looked at. And the other element was, what's your best chance of winning? And here's how teams win. Every team that wins has what kind of superstar on it. And when we trace back, Freddie Freeman was on Atlanta, or Alex Bregman, and Tucker and Alvarez were in Houston. And Freddie Freeman is again on the Dodgers, and he left Atlanta. Now the Dodgers are winning and Atlanta's not. And Mookie Betts leaves Boston. They won in 2018, and now the Dodgers are winning and Boston isn't. So you see, with the tide of having that core of superstars, the relationship of the goal of winning a world championship is now more probable to owners. And so all of that data is shared and given. There is also the idea of creating a brand that doesn't exist. How do I win New York? How do I win the fact that we are considered to be one of the best sports franchises of all sport franchises? And so those kinds of things also generate what we call external asset to ownership potential, is that other businesses come to that ownership because they are a winning brand, and they create all kinds of new ideas and revenue streams from having a championship level performance by your baseball club.
Yeah, and I think you just mentioned several elements, right? One is what you called is PBRs, right? You talked about a trend of sort of a core group of superstars going to a particular team and leading that organization to a world championship. I guess one of the questions we wanted to hear from you about was technology, right? So Ticket Manager is a technology company in the ticketing space, right? A software-based company. And as we know, technology has influenced baseball quite a bit in a variety of ways, whether it's analytics and numbers crunching, whether it's some of the new innovations with pace of play. What is your take on sort of where technology is and is going in Major League Baseball?
Well, we have in our own company 30 people that are designed to essentially grow and build our database.
And how many of those did you have 10 years ago?
Maybe as many as 10, but these are highly accomplished, scientists, engineers, econometric, staffing. Not being completely adept. Law school does not teach you these things. I studied medicine, so I have a little bit of understanding of variable studies and all the weights and things that go in the algorithmic process to make assumptions more probable, looking at elements that frankly aren't looked at. We have our own prioritized value system for what we consider to be, we don't particularly agree with the WAR system. There's some commonality to it, but our methods of evaluating players and the value of them are much more compartmentalized than comprehensive, because frankly, when you look at sport leagues, there is roughly over a 3-year period almost a 60% change. So you understand that most people in the league are going to be there because they're the best available, not that they're the best. And we're always to try to find why are the best, what makes them the best, how to optimize their skill, what to do, how to appraise it at earlier ages. Psychology and algorithms are something that are very, very acknowledged in our systems, where they are not so by teams. Why? Because it is subjective rather than objective. Teams tend to use objective criteria a great deal, but they are often, there's exceptions to the rule that do very, very well without having the requisite tools that they identify as most valuable. So when you're looking at this and you talk about technology, the unfortunate part is that it is very, very expensive to take what your interpretation of what you want to define as an evaluation system and turn that into software. And my staff is always getting me to spend millions of dollars with very select and bright software companies to derive very original software modalities that we utilize to create our database. But
I'm sure they're thankful to you for that.
They are. Again, it's not that it's not insightful, productive, but the excitement of knowing the game at levels that are never communicated by the majority of the teams and what we discuss, it is an exciting, original process. We try to convert it to their terms rather than create a new language. And that's sometimes difficult, but it allows us with our clients to really illustrate valuations and reasons for the valuations that give them confidence, that allow them to endure slumps and overcome performance deficits where they know over the long term if they continue with a path rather than giving up on it and starting a completely different one. For them to trust that their swing is their swing or their delivery is their delivery, even when they're not effective, they're not getting the results that they would hope for. All of those things, I think, are performance related, durability related. How do you make players durable? What do you do to do it? We've got a Sports Fitness Institute. We have our own trainers and training staff, independent of the teams, which no agency has. We have psychologists, which is not something that I think any agency in sport has. We provide all these resources for athletes, commit to them, and I think it gives them the ability to have higher performance results over a longer period of time. And of course, for our business model, that allows us an opportunity to represent players that have become elite in what they do.
Scott, Michael was just at the Super Bowl a couple of weeks ago, a few weeks back, on behalf of Ticket Manager. That reminded me of something you've been lobbying for a long time, and I know I've discussed it with you. Could you share with our audience what you think baseball should do for the World Series, for its big stage?
Baseball is so suited for a World Series week because you have an opportunity to provide live content. Not just one game, but 5, 6, 7 games during that week. The Super Bowl, having gone to a couple of them, is not about football. It is about corporate business interaction. It is about entertainment. It's a festival. It really is. It is something that is absolutely very different than the game itself, which tells us that everyone is desirous of a forum so they can treat their employees, they can introduce and market new businesses, new models of their products. They can all do it, but yet probably only 30% of the people there ever actually attend the game. Obviously, and I thought of this I sent a letter to Bud Selig about 2002, I think. And I said, we need World Series week so corporations and fans can plan to come see it. There are generations of fans that have never seen a World Series. And I'm sure fathers and grandfathers would like to take their grandsons and granddaughters to these games, even though you can say we went to a World Series, even though it wasn't our team. And if I have season tickets and we have so many season ticket holders from our specific team can come to the World Series, that fan may buy season tickets knowing that my team is a provider of World Series seats for me where I can go to one game. I can also have entertainment, music, food, all forms of arenas of entertainment. For those fans, they can go and attend one game and stay for a week. And they still get to say they went to a game. They get to go to 5 or 6 different entertainment venues and have this amazing worldwide international event. We can invite varieties of music, entertainment there. We can have a true home run derby. We can have our gala for our awards. We can do all of that. We'd have all the superstars of that season in one spot, and they could be there at the opening game of the World Series. This is the National League and American League MVP, the Cy Young Award winners. They're honored before a World Series crowd. Yeah, a gala where all of them are there, where the announcement is done common to all the players and their families. It would be an Oscars of baseball at World Series week, all planned, cities bidding for it. All of these things could be done to where we have a beautiful steak and we're serving it at a fast food restaurant under the current plan. And what we say is that the sacrifice is that we don't get the World Series in the home cities of those teams. But if you've been to a World Series, guess what? You understand that the majority of the tickets are not going to the home team audience. And so, and you also get the playoffs, you get different levels for that to experience. But it's a tradition where we need to make the sport and grow the sport internationally. We'll have international journalists there. We'll have entertainment there. It'll become a focus where everyone is talking about World Series week, different from the Super Bowl, because you're actually there to watch the momentum and the drama of the series unfold before you.
Yeah, and you mentioned how that sort of a setup would really allow corporations and brands to sink their teeth into the World Series in baseball. So obviously, as a someone who's representing players, there'll be a lot of brands who are customers of Ticket Manager watching this. As you think about how when brands want to do something commercially with one of your players, right? Whether it's Bryce Harper in Philadelphia or Pete Alonso in New York or Alex Bregman now in Boston, and it helps promote the player, it helps promote the sport. What are some of the things you've seen brands do that you've really liked or would recommend because it allows for a good relationship between those brands and the players they're working with?
Michael, we have a little bit of an introduction into what this could be at the All-Star Game. Why? We know where the All-Star Game is. We know the date of it. So corporate sponsorship is far more advanced in the All-Star Game than it is in the World Series for that reason. And then also we have corporate sponsorship that engages all of our players because they know how to set up the forum. They can set up all the elements about their desires to market their product and how the player will interact with that. We have time to do it. We have a whole element of functionality that occurs, relationship that occurs, all for that schedule so that everyone has the appropriate time to set up something that's very productive for the game, for the sponsors, and for the players involved.
So, as someone who, of course, interacts with players on a daily basis, let's talk tickets for a second. So, Ticket Manager, obviously, a software company that allows these brands and entities to manage their tickets. You have season tickets of your own for your company at various teams. You have players who have tickets in their deals. And I'm sure once in a while, a player might reach out and ask for help getting tickets to another type of sports and entertainment event from you. How much are you talking about tickets, thinking about tickets, dealing with tickets on a daily and weekly basis?
Well, tickets are far from tickets. Tickets are access to something that someone wants to see and be a part of. So tickets are very personal. They're a part of you. And so consequently, the idea of what someone's access to them is something that is very personal to them and therefore very important to them. And what we always try to do is that we have various forms of collaboration with a variety of people that allow us to certainly, exchange or barter or create those moments for our clients that are important, And we have a sports marketing company, Boras Marketing, that is involved with corporate individuals, memorabilia. We do all of the equipment contracts for all of our players. So we have contacts with a variety of companies that also have contacts with other companies that lead us to the requisite requests that our players, have and need in the desire of what they choose to attend.
So, Scott, I'm going to capitalize on my PhD in Borasology as someone who has covered you for a very long time. And for those in the audience who don't know, every year there's a general managers meetings, and it's always on, I think it's usually on the Wednesday, the third day. Scott holds a big press conference for all the media on site, usually 50 to 100 media on site. And he talks about his clients who are just becoming free agents. And he has some scripted jokes, which have become an annual highlight. And my personal favorites were when Bryce Harper was a free agent, you said it's Harper's Bazaar. And then you got really complicated, but you nailed it with Brandon Nimmo. You said whoever Pixar guy, Pixar, will be finding Nimmo. So I'm wondering, how can we monetize this, Scott? You have a contest out there? Because if Pete Alonso opts out after this year, how about the repeat is better than the original or something like that?
Well said, David.
Thank you.
But for purposes here, let me punch your ticket. Right, I got it. And we're not soft on acquisition of tickets and the variety of their software either, no doubt. We have repetitive cycles, and over the years, I really wanted it. That I have high regard for the abilities of the many journalists that we work with, and it got to the point where rather than being annually stuffy and talking about the new free agents and going through the normal cycle, that we all participate in a measure of certainly hilarity, often stupidity, an exchange of fun limericks that over the years I think are something that we get a lot of ideas from, frankly, from a lot of people, and we often utilize them, and I think it makes the job and the function a lot more enjoyable, no doubt.
Well, it always tough to top that banter. So we're going to wrap up with some quick hitters, if you will. So just quick thoughts, no right or wrong answer, and really drawing on your time in baseball, Scott. So let's start with, you've attended thousands of Major League Baseball games in person. Which one ranks as your favorite of all time?
I'm not sure it's one other than the first one, where a scout for the Cincinnati Reds took me to meet my hero, which was Willie Mays. And he took me into the locker room, and Willie Mays had struck out a few times that day, and he took a look at me and said, "Get that kid," and a few other words, "out of the locker room." And so, and I represented Barry Bonds, and I had the great fortune of meeting Willie personally and talking with him. And for me, the greatest baseball player I've ever seen. And so, obviously, going to my first Major League game and seeing the field and the grass and watching Willie Mays, it was a dream come true and something you'll never forget. The other parts of that are when the players that you represent, when they win that world championship, and you just remember I remember in San Diego, Bertie Williams giving me a big hug after, the Yankees had won another championship. Keith Hernandez, and walking with New York City with him after the Mets had won. It was amazing to see what acclaim and how the fans held such, they were all just glowing, the entire city, if you will. So you've seen, watching Corey Seager win World Series, World Championships, and having so many players on the Washington Nationals in 19, and you always remember so many events of I remember I told Johnny Damon when he signed with the Red Sox, whatever you do, don't talk about winning the World Series. It's been a while here. Johnny came in and we're going to win that World Series. And when they did, it was really something to see, because he came up, "I told you so," So you have all of these really historic memories of greatness. And I have a friend who's an oncologist. It's amazing what he does, but we all know that the success rate is so rare. And to have this job and to get to enjoy the greatest of moments with players, for the most part, it's really, really a thrill to and a privilege to have a job like this. It really is.
So you mentioned Willie Mays is your favorite player, or was your favorite player. Why don't we end with favorite ballpark and why?
Well, probably that, San Francisco ballpark overlooks the bay and the Bay Bridge. And I was raised on a farm near there. We didn't get to leave the farm too often, between a dairy and the field work and all of that. And so to cross that bridge and go to that ballpark. Whenever I'm there, I look out on it and such. I get to sit in front row of Dodger Stadium a lot. I've always felt that the venue in Pittsburgh was really, really, really something to behold. And so when I think about ballparks and, and there's many that have been crafted of late that are really special places, but obviously most of these things are personal to your upbringing and things along that line.
Well, look, I think, let me just say on behalf of our audience and certainly Ticket Manager, Scott, we appreciate you joining the latest in the Ticket Manager All Access interview series. And Ken, appreciate you being the co-host, and of course couldn't have done this without you. Looking forward to perhaps having you on again to talk business of baseball at some point down the line. And thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Scott.
Well, always a pleasure, Ken, and Michael, pleasure meeting you. And thank you for the winning ticket.